It's a big week for Jay-Z. His Rock Nation is geared up to produce the most watched live performance of the year, the Super Bowl halftime show. And of course, he was there to cheer on his wife, who took home the coveted award of Album of the Year at this year's Grammys. So in light of all of that, he's also making a surprising move in his ongoing back and forth with Tony Busby. Now at this point, we all know who the Texas-based attorney is.
Diddy lost control in that courtroom. And what unfolded in front of the cameras wasn't just a legal battle. It was a collapse of an empire. The unraveling of a man who spent decades untouchable, suddenly caught in a storm that he couldn't buy his way out of, couldn't charm his way past, couldn't silence with money.
We now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases.
And of course, we know later that Jane Doe, who is being represented by the Texas attorney, filed a suit a couple weeks after this press conference accusing Diddy of raping her when she was just 13 years old. Then amended that complaint weeks later, adding Jay-Z, Sean Carter's name to that child rape lawsuit alongside Diddy. A female celebrity was also mentioned in that complaint as well. However, her identity has since remained a mystery. Since Busby, what he had calculated was the nature of these allegations and the public scrutiny would make me want to settle. No, sir, it had the opposite effect. It made me want to expose you for the fraud you are in a very public fashion. So no, I will not give you one red penny. Now that statement went on to call Tony Busby a deplorable human, a man with no valor, and an ambulance chaser in a cheap suit.
Threats or power. But what sent him over the edge, what pushed him from barely contained frustration into pure rage, wasn't just the prison sentence looming over him. It was a revelation so explosive, so shattering, that it not only dragged him down, but risked taking someone else down with him. Jay-Z. The moment the prosecutor mentioned Jay-Z's name, the energy in the courtroom shifted.
Lots of motions filed, complaints filed, and accusations flying on both ends. The Jane Doe alleging she was raped by Diddy and Jay-Z went on NBC, where they pointed out consistencies in her account of what happened, including that her father picked her up after the alleged rape. Her father later told NBC he didn't recall that. She claimed she spoke to a celebrity there, but that celeb wasn't even in New York at that time. And photos showed Diddy and Jay-Z at different locations than the Jane Doe described. Now, that interview happened in mid-December. By the end of that month, Jay-Z sued Busby for defamation and extortion. Jay-Z's legal team has also been pushing for the Jane Doe to not hide under anonymity. And of course, Jay-Z's lawyers have been trying to get his name off that child rape lawsuit or just have it dismissed altogether. Now, a judge ruled that she can proceed anonymously for now, but scolded Jay-Z's attorneys for their combative motions and inflammatory language used against Tony Busby. Then in January, a legal petition was filed by a Texas man who is represented by Tony Busby, who also accused Jay-Z's lawyers of bribing people to sue Busby and his law firm. So a lot's happened. Now in a surprising move, Jay-Z's lawyer Alex Spiro is seemingly softening up on Busby. In a letter to Judge Annalisa Torres, the same one who previously scolded him, Spiro wrote, quote, "Dear Judge Torres, we write on behalf of defendant Sean Carter to respectfully request that Mr. Carter's motion for sanctions pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 11 be withdrawn at this time without prejudice. We have discussed this matter with counsel for plaintiff, who consents to this submission and agrees the withdrawal is without prejudice." And that motion was terminated. So what does it mean? Well, last month, Jay-Z's lawyer asked the court to impose sanctions against Busby for allegedly failing to do a reasonable investigation before filing the rape allegations against him. Jay-Z's lawyer even pointed out that Busby admitted to not even meeting Jane Doe before he signed off on her complaint. But Busby maintains the case was appropriately vetted. So while the move from Jay-Z's lawyers was surprising, it might also be a part of their strategy. At this time, neither Jay-Z, his legal team, or Tony Busby have publicly responded to this surprising move. But it's likely not the end of this ongoing legal saga, and we could hear more very soon. Let's unpack this further with attorney and litigator Rich Schoenstein. Rich, always great to see you. What's your reaction to this move done by Jay-Z's lawyer Alex Spiro? Are you surprised that he asked the judge to drop the motion for sanctioning Tony Busby?
Well, I'm a little bit surprised because, asking for sanctions is a pretty aggressive move. And so to turn around and withdraw that motion is a notable retreat from that move. So I wasn't expecting it. And the question is, why did they do it? And I would assume that's what we're going to talk about.
Definitely. And I, also want to ask, this letter said they want to withdraw it without prejudice. Why is that part important?
Well, without prejudice just means they could bring it again. So you can either withdraw a motion with prejudice, which means it's resolved and we can't bring it again, or without prejudice, which means the court doesn't have to deal with this now.
Jurors froze mid-scribble. Jurors leaned in. The gallery buzzed with disbelief, and Diddy snapped. This wasn't a passing reference. This wasn't an innocent connection. This was a direct tie. Evidence and testimony linking two of hip-hop's biggest titans in ways that no one expected to be laid bare in open court. And Diddy's reaction told everyone watching just how dangerous that revelation really was. His face twisted with rage. His hands shook as he pounded the table. His voice cracked as he shouted at the prosecutor to stop, to leave Jay out of it, to erase the connection. It was panic, raw and unfiltered. The kind of fear you don't see from a man used to controlling every room he's ever walked into. The judge slammed the gavel over and over, ordering silence, but the eruption only confirmed the one thing everyone suspected. Diddy knew that if Jay-Z's name was tied to this case, the damage wouldn't just end with him. It could take down the entire structure of an industry that had protected them both for decades.
A was a man and Celeb B was a woman. There had been rumblings that Celebrity B is actually Jennifer Lopez, who was Diddy's girlfriend at the time, but that has not been confirmed. What has been confirmed, though, at least according to Jane Doe, is that Celebrity A is Jay-Z. In December, Jane Doe amended her lawsuit to publicly name Jay-Z, alleging he raped her that night. And again, reminder, she's only 13 at the time. Jay-Z completely denies these allegations. He's made a motion earlier this month even for Jane Doe to reveal her identity. And that's not the first time we've seen this tactic, and the last time it actually worked. We reported on this too. The original Jane Doe, who filed civil suit against Diddy in late 2023, the one who included pictures in her lawsuit, was just recently ordered to reveal her name publicly. And that's when we learned that Jane Doe is actually Anna Kane. She's known mostly as the ex-wife of hockey player Evander Kane. So following this same pattern, Jay-Z's team filed a motion demanding Jane Doe make her name public. Here's what his team wrote. Admissions by the plaintiff, meaning Jane Doe, and damning admissions by her own father in a December 13 revelatory NBC interview cast yet further doubt on a claim that was obviously false from the start. The timeline, location, and occurrence of events alleged in plaintiff's complaint are rendered impossible by these admissions. She claims her father picked her up after the assault, and this next part they mean to write, he took a 5-hour trip. She claims she spoke with musician Benji Madden that night. He was not even in New York. She claims the assault took place at an after-party hosted in a private residence. Photos show Mr. Carter at an after-party at a nightclub. When pressed by NBC, plaintiff was forced to admit, "I've made some mistakes. I may have made a mistake in identifying. Not all faces there are as clear, and even that she was guessing about key details, including the time it took to reach the venue." What is more, she admits she does not have a single corroborating witness over the last 24 years. In this motion, Jay-Z's team calls for an immediate preservation order, suggesting that Tony Busby, Jane Doe's attorney, could destroy key evidence in the case. The filing even says there's a substantial risk that this may happen. So Jay-Z wants this preservation order, but if not that, he wants the lawsuit completely thrown out and dismissed. But the judge wasn't going for it. This is the spicy part of the motion we mentioned earlier. To start, she broke down the criteria for keeping a plaintiff's name out of a lawsuit, saying there are several key factors in play in Jane Doe's case. One, whether the litigation involves matters that are highly sensitive and of a personal nature. Two, whether identification poses a risk of retaliatory physical or mental harm to the party seeking to proceed anonymously, or even more critically, to innocent non-parties. Another risk, whether the plaintiff is particularly vulnerable to the possible harms of disclosure, particularly in light of her age, and whether the plaintiff's identity has thus far been kept confidential. Now, the motion lays out the pros and cons of keeping Jane Doe's name quiet.
Alliances forged behind the scenes to keep control of music, money, and influence. Fans speculated, bloggers hinted, insiders teased, but it was always dismissed as conspiracy, as jealous talk, as background noise. Until now. Now those whispers were no longer speculation. They were in evidence logs. They were in depositions. They were being read into the record for the world to hear. The prosecutor laid out a timeline. Shared flights, overlapping financial interests, late-night events hidden from public calendars. money shuffled between offshore accounts and shell corporations. To the untrained eye, it looked like business. To investigators, it looked like a network designed to protect reputations and bury secrets. And as the courtroom listened, the implications became clear. This wasn't just about Diddy's actions. This was about a system of silence, a web of connections, and Jay-Z's name was now tangled in it. Diddy couldn't take it. He shouted, slammed his chair back, and for a brief second it looked like he might lunge toward the prosecutor. Guards closed in fast, restraining him, while his lawyers begged the judge for leniency.
All of that really mean? So we're joined now by criminal defense attorney Adam Conta to take a closer look at the judge's ruling. Now, Adam, is this a win for Jane Doe, do you think, to remain anonymous?
Yeah, it's a win for Jane Doe, certainly, but it's like a short win. It's really much more of a loss for the legal team of Jay-Z and Diddy.
Why would you say that? Because the judge was kind of harsh to Jay-Z and Diddy in her response?
Yeah, this is sort of like, if a child asks you for something and you're trying to teach them a lesson, you say, no, not right now. Go be good for a little while, then come back and ask me again. That is almost exactly what Judge Annalisa Torres did here. She wanted to send a message directly to Alex Spiro, who is obviously one of the most prolific attorneys in the country right now. I've known him for 20 years. He started as a DA in Manhattan. I knew him as a DA in Manhattan. I had cases against him as a DA in Manhattan. And he's gone on to do incredible things. But he has a very specific style. And there's a lot of people who don't like that style. And Judge Torres is one of them. He's now twice kind of taken the reins and tried to take control of the narrative of cases by putting on sort of these preemptive press conferences. He did it with Mayor Adams, and he did it now with Jay-Z, where he goes to the press and essentially puts on a PowerPoint and says, hey, this is why I think this case is garbage. This is all the inconsistencies. This is where this case fails. But it's obviously from his point of view. And so the judge doesn't like that. The other side of that, especially for me as a defense attorney, is, well, that's what the DAs do every time they make a big arrest. That's what the federal prosecutors do every time they make a big arrest. They go in front of the camera and they put on this sort of dog and pony show press conference to tell the nation why this is such a just arrest, why this is such a just prosecution, and to try to get public opinion behind them as they move forward in the case. It's really Alex Spiro doing the exact opposite thing to help his client, but the judge really didn't like it. And so all of that is to say that this ruling to me is specifically directed at Alex Spiro, saying, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like all the motions you're filing. I don't like how you're going about handling this case. And if you continue to do it, you're not the only one who's got some tricks up their sleeve. I can also do things to make this process more difficult.
Yeah, the second half of this motion was kind of crazy. She really called him out. I thought it was really interesting to go through the motion and read it. And it sounds like it was a major tactic on his side to do these press conferences, as you said, file these motions. So if he doesn't stop doing that and just continues bombarding her with all of these motions, what sort of response could the judge have?
If I'm being honest, not much. The federal court system has a lot of power, and the judges there have a lot of power, and they demand a level of respect that sometimes judges in state court don't demand. And I say respect, actually, it's more formality. They demand a formality in the process. And so they can do these things and they can make your life very difficult, but they don't have a lot of leverage, especially over someone like Alex Spiro, who works at a private firm. The judges can't stop him from continuing to bring in.
But it was too late. The eruption was already recorded, the clip already being streamed to millions of viewers across the world. Diddy wasn't calm. He wasn't controlled. He was terrified. And nothing says more than the fear in a man who built an image of invincibility. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was immediate. Social media exploded. Hashtags lit up. # Jay-Z exposed. # Diddy meltdown. # hip-hop on trial. Fans debated endlessly. Was Jay-Z complicit? Was he an innocent bystander being dragged into someone else's mess? Or was this the smoking gun, the moment when decades of suspicion finally cracked wide open? Industry insiders panicked. Executives made frantic phone calls. Lawyers drafted emergency statements.
There was a plan. And also, this concerns evidence of other sexual assaults. So basically what we're talking about is what the government plans to introduce and for what purpose and how they will introduce it. And the prosecution plans to provide notice of this by March 7th. Combs' team says the government should have to disclose this by February 1st. Okay, so you get back and forth about what the date will be. From there, we have something called motions in limine. So motions in limine, and for anybody who's been following our trials might know what these are motions to exclude evidence or arguments from coming into trial. The jury will never hear about this. For example, something might be too prejudicial, or maybe it's not relevant, or maybe it was obtained through illegal means and can't come in and needs to be suppressed. So the prosecution is asking for all parties to file their motions by March 21st, oppositions to those motions by April 4th. The defense has put forward a different timetable. They are asking for both parties to file their motions by April 1st and oppositions by April 11th. They say unless the government makes disclosures earlier, we just can't be prepared to file motions in limine by their timeline. In other words, how can we know exactly what needs to be excluded or what we want to be excluded from trial unless the government provides us some disclosures about their case? And then from there, we move on to another section of the letter discussing 3500 material. So that's about statements and reports of government witnesses, including their attorneys. The government wants to produce all that by March 21st under an attorney eyes only designation, probably to make sure that no information about the witnesses is leaked before the trial, and also only in an attorney's possession designation so Combs can review that material in April. And the government highlights that there is a need for this because of allegations of witness tampering and obstruction on the part of Combs. We've talked about these allegations before, that Combs allegedly, including while locked up at the MDC, had tried to reach out to witnesses and victims in this case, even by using intermediaries. The defense says, no. We want the government to disclose this 3500 material about the witnesses by March 1st. And they argue otherwise, the government could potentially be withholding exculpatory information from the defense until March 21st. That's not fair. When we're talking about exculpatory evidence, this is favorable evidence to the defense. And by the way, more specifically, in the letter, this is what the defense argues regarding victim one in this case, who we believe is Cassandra Ventura, Combs' ex-girlfriend. She filed that initial lawsuit against him in 2023. That got the ball rolling on all of the other lawsuits and potentially the criminal charges. So they write in this letter, for instance, the government appears to take the view that information undermining certain claims by victim one need not be disclosed promptly because it is merely impeachment rather than exculpatory and therefore should not be disclosed until the 3500 deadline. Basically, the government is saying, look, this evidence doesn't prove Combs didn't commit the crimes that he's charged with, but it's evidence that can be used by the defense when they cross-examine victim one when she takes the stand at trial. In other words, there's no reason for us to present this kind of evidence to you earlier than what we're proposing. But the defense writes, this overlooks the fact that evidence that undermines her claims also undermines the government's theory of the case and the criminal allegations, making them affirmatively exculpatory. It also minimizes the time required to make effective use of the withheld information. Of course, regardless of whether information qualifies as exculpatory or impeachment.
If prosecutors had dug this deep, who else's name was buried in the files? Who else might be exposed next? And in the middle of it all, Jay-Z himself stayed silent. No statements. No denials. No carefully crafted Instagram posts to distance himself. Just silence. And in that silence, the world filled the void with theories, suspicion, and paranoia. Was he hiding? Was he preparing his own defense? Or was he confident enough to believe the storm would pass without touching him? But silence doesn't stop the avalanche. Witnesses began describing private events. Exclusive gatherings attended by both moguls, shielded from the public eye, where the boundaries between business and personal blurred into something much darker. Financial documents hinted at co-investments in projects that never saw daylight, where money vanished into consulting fees and creative funds. The more prosecutors dug, the more it seemed like Diddy and Jay-Z weren't just friends or collaborators. They were co-architects of a shadow empire. And yet, the courtroom wasn't just about evidence. It was about perception. And perception is what destroyed Diddy that day. Because his meltdown, his screaming fit, His desperate attempt to shield Jay-Z's name from the record told the world everything they needed to know.
And included also by Jay-Z's legal team is a screenshot of what appears to be a video, so it's a still shot from a YouTube video that is titled 2000 MTV VMAs Red Carpet, and it appears that someone is performing on an outdoor stage in New York, but from that pic, yeah, you don't see a Jumbotron. Then Spiro continues, and the same paragraph says that plaintiff approached limousine drivers at the VMAs, and by the way, the allegation was there is that a limousine driver had taken her to this party. But, Spiro writes, video shows that the limousine area was cordoned off by police and inaccessible to fans. And included is another screenshot of that same video from YouTube of the exterior of the Radio City Music Hall where the VMAs was being held. And you see limousines outside with police appearing to be on each side, and there are barricades. Now, this accuser did concede to NBC that she has, quote, made some mistakes in her retelling of the story, but she stands by her account, saying you should always fight for what happened to you, you should always advocate for yourself and be a voice for yourself, you should never let what somebody else did ruin or run your life. I just hope I can give others the strength to come forward like I came forward. But obviously, Jay-Z and Spiro disagree, right? And they say in their memorandum, confronted with those glaring red flags, a competent and ethical attorney, again talking about Tony Buzbee, would have not only omitted the many erroneous allegations from the complaint, but also completed a thorough and careful vetting of the core assault allegation before affixing his or her signature to the complaint. Abiding by that ethical duty was especially important here, given the defamatory character of the assault allegation and the near certainty that the complaint would generate massive publicity in light of the identity of the defendant, inflicting irreparable reputational harm and forcing him to explain to his own children that he had been falsely accused of assaulting a child. And conducting a thorough inquiry is particularly critical, whereas here, the plaintiff has no corroborating witness for her account and claims that she did not tell a soul about the incident at any point in the last quarter century, including her father, who supposedly picked her up. Spiro continues that a reporter was able to undercut almost all of the events of plaintiff's narrative just 5 days after the FAC, the first amended complaint, was filed only highlights the complete lack of investigation undertaken by her own attorneys. A simple call to her father, a review of publicly available video footage and photos from that night at and after the VMAs, or a review of publicly available property records would have quickly revealed the implausibility of her allegations. But Mr. Buzbee has all but admitted that he declined to undertake such a basic investigation. When confronted by NBC News journalists with the series of false allegations in the complaint, Mr. Buzbee sought to cover for his utter lack of diligence by claiming his client would undergo a polygraph examination, an offer he seems to have abandoned since making it weeks ago.
Jay-Z wasn't just a name mentioned in passing. He was part of something Diddy could not afford to see dragged into daylight. Journalists pounced. Headlines screamed, Diddy dragged Jay-Z into trial chaos. Editorials asked hard questions. How deep does this go? Can hip-hop's biggest moguls survive the truth? Analysts on news networks replayed the footage of Diddy's eruption, frame by frame, pointing to the moment his mask slipped, the exact second his panic betrayed him. The industry itself trembled. Executives debated whether to distance from Jay-Z, fearing the fallout. Brands that once bragged about their partnerships quietly went dark, removing names from websites, pulling promotional material. Artists whispered to each other in studio halls, "If they have evidence on him, we're all next." For fans, the betrayal cut deep. Diddy's empire was already collapsing, but Jay-Z was supposed to be untouchable, a figure who rose above the scandals. Now his name was in the mud, and his silence only fueled the fire.
Before he commenced suit. And Spiro also cites case law from this appellate court decision in support of sanctions. It's called the Levine case. And he writes, there, the court upheld sanctions where subsequent deposition testimony from both the plaintiff and one of the defendants revealed that statements in the pleadings and other filings were provably false. In so doing, the Second Circuit credited the district court's conclusions that the complaint's allegations were not well grounded in fact, and that plaintiff's counsel had ignored facts revealed through reasonable inquiry and perpetuated his misconduct through the filing of numerous memoranda well after his errors were revealed to him. That is precisely what Mr. Buzbee has done here. The court should come to the same conclusion as the Second Circuit in Levine. Now, this is a good argument, but at the same time, we don't know exactly what the facts were in Levine. Could be kind of different with what we're dealing with here. I'm sure when Tony Busby responds, he will address that case as well. But just going to one final thing that Alex Spiro writes in this filing. It's important because he writes, the nature of the allegations here warrant sanctions. This is not a contract dispute or a patent case. This is an allegation of child rape. To sign a pleading accusing someone of such a horrific crime without adequately vetting the allegation, particularly when the defendant's prominence means that the allegation will be repeated in headlines across the world, is deeply wrong and unethical. If lawyers do not face consequences for such a cavalier effort to destroy another person's reputation and inflict emotional harm on his loved ones, that tactic will proliferate. And at the same time, Combs has also been accused in several civil lawsuits of drugging and raping people as far back as the 90s. The allegations come from both men and women, including some who say that they were just teens when they were targeted. And in the midst of a flurry of lawsuits, before he faced criminal charges in federal court, we learned about a man named Derek Cardello Smith. This is an inmate incarcerated at Ernst C. Brooks Correctional Facility out in Michigan. Now, he has been convicted multiple times for criminal sexual conduct and kidnapping. Cardello Smith appeared on a judge's live stream from prison representing himself to explain why he wanted an injunction against, out of all people, Sean Combs.
This is in the matter of Derek Lee Cardello Smith, MDOC number 267009 versus Sean Combs, Sean Puff Daddy Combs, also known as Sean P. Diddy, also known as Diddy, Bad Boy Records, label owner, founder, also known as Puff P. Daddy, Bad Boy, Diddy Run the City, Sean Combs, also known as Sean Puffy Combs. And this is file number 24-7362NO. I'll grab your paperwork here real quick out of this other paperwork. We do have Mr. Cardello Smith appearing from the Michigan Department of Corrections. Sir, where are you currently located?
Some defended him, clinging to the idea that this was guilt by association. Others demanded accountability, arguing that silence was complicity. And through it all, Diddy sat in that courtroom, raging against the inevitable, knowing that the storm wasn't just his anymore. The judge, unimpressed, called for order. This trial is about the truth, the judge said firmly. No one is above it. And with that, Jay-Z's name officially entered the court record, forever tied to the proceedings. It was no longer rumor, no longer speculation. It was fact, stamped in transcripts that would outlive them all. And that's what made Diddy lose it entirely. Because this wasn't just about a prison sentence. This was about a legacy imploding, about connections being dragged into the light, about an empire of power and silence crumbling for all to see. When the gavel struck, the world realized something chilling. This trial isn't just about Diddy anymore. It's about a culture of shadows, of protection, of secrecy. And those shadows are finally being dragged into the open. And if Jay-Z's name is there, who's next? The meltdown, the revelations, the silence. It all points to one truth. Diddy thought he could fight alone, but the moment Jay-Z's name was exposed, he knew the fight was over. Because when the foundation cracks, the empire falls. And right now, the cracks are spreading faster than anyone can contain.